After winning the Revolutionary War, George Washington resigned his post as the leader of the Continental Army. And there was a specific scripted ceremony for him to come to the Continental Congress and resign. And this was scripted by Thomas Jefferson. It was intended to be very symbolic of what the new government would be. Now, this would not have worked without Thomas Jefferson. It would not have worked without John Adams. It would not have worked without George Washington. It would not have worked without any of the three of them. Yet, traditionally, um, military leaders who conquered and won then stayed in power and then afterwards ultimately would claim power, political power, is a very old concept. George Washington, who had been part of the Continental Congress prior, was not going to be a hypocrite to the cause he set out to back up. So he shows up and resigns. And the tradition had been to stand up in the presence of superiors, take your hat off, all this kind of stuff. And instead, what every last member of the Continental Congress did was they remained seated and kept their hats on as George Washington resigned his post. I'm sure there were thank yous, things like that, respectful statements, but not that of inferiors speaking to a superior, but rather of superiors speaking to the one serving them. Okay. And so, to me, I think this is super powerful. I just recently watched the Newt Gingrich documentary on George Washington. Fantastic documentary. It's free on YouTube. I highly recommend it. I have pointed out again and again. By the way, I think it's worth pointing out, and some people aren't going to like this. That's fine. Don't like it if you don't want to. Washington was pretty much the richest man, one of the richest men in America at the time. He had been very successful in real estate, and President Trump is our most comparable president in that regard. Both donated their salaries. They didn't need their salaries, right? So there might be something to at least stop and think about with President Trump. I cannot find evil in the man that a lot of people would like to ascribe to him. And in general, actually, I'm blown away how often he does the things that the prophets say would need to have been done, ending these entangling alliances and what have you, and reducing the administrative state, etc. He's actually really on the ball. So you can complain and conspiracy theorize all you want about his connections to Israel. I'd be careful about that too, honestly. I mean, think about it. You're literally like complaining about the existence of Israel. If you have absolute proof, great. Let's see it. Otherwise. But again, I don't want to get too distracted from the point here is that Washington, what made him great in our eyes, is his willingness to hand over power. The tradition of the founders, we've been told to look at the Constitution and the tradition of the founders. Now, Hamilton is the most willing to push the Constitution further. And I think he's actually right, the more I've examined the Constitution in a lot of things. But I think the overwhelming tradition of the founding presidents is actually caution in general, especially with the first three, Washington stepping down after 2 terms, even though he didn't have to. Adams hesitating to exercise the veto power. Plus, he did have a general kind of concern for the United States with the Alienist Edition Act, it seems. I'm not an expert on the subject, but Jefferson being concerned, am I allowed to do this Louisiana Purchase? Yes, that's the traditional treaty powers. That is what you're allowed to do, but he wanted it to be like clearly laid out. But of course, we have the first written down Constitution ever where we actually deal with clearly enumerated powers, procedures, thresholds, powers prohibited, promises guaranteed, all these kind of things. I think the promises guaranteed is probably the oldest concept, and sometimes we tend to forget that aspect of it. Proper purposes of government are in there. So anyhow, coming back to the point, I've pointed out a chiasm that whether it's really made by heaven or not, although I think Ezra Taft Benson would say, that regarding prophets, and I would say probably regarding political leaders too, they aren't put in by chance and they aren't removed by happenstance or something like that. That's in his talk, Jesus Christ Gifts and Expectations. We have 3 out of the 5 founding presidents that all died on the 4th of July. There's no other presidents that have ever died on the 4th of July. 2 of them died 50 years to the day after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And if you look at those 5 presidents, you've got a chiasm. Great military leader. Then John Adams, who wrote the oldest in use state constitution. It was the second Massachusetts state constitution, if I'm not mistaken, written in 1779. And then, so he was a constitutional political theorist. And then you have Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and nature's God. And then you've got, and who also scripted this whole ceremony. And then Madison, who wrote, who we call him the father of the U.S. Constitution. And then Monroe, a great military political leader who basically told Europe, stay out of our business, which is similar to what Washington did too. So again, military man, constitutional political theorist, natural law, natural rights, God's laws, constitutional political theorist, military man. I think we need to be focusing on what Washington was willing to focus on. Washington was willing to focus on exactly what they set out to do. That he wasn't the most important part of it, except for that he was the servant. And I do believe in saying, I know Skousen says, stop saying thank you for your service to military people. Look, man, if you see somebody who's got PTSD or something like that, yeah, you absolutely tell them that. I'm starting to disagree with Joel Skousen on a lot of the things he says. I'm going to be honest. But it's service is what it is. And even up to the generals, I don't care, General Milley or whoever you guys are, you're nothing without what the Constitution sets up. Don't you dare forget it. The most important positions are the ones that are actually laid out in the Constitution itself. Not yours. Not even kind of. I don't care if you're there longer. We don't care, dudes. We're not taking off our hats for you. We're not standing up for you. You serve us. And anyhow, that's a little kind of belligerent to me the way I just now said that, but it seems to be representative of what we're supposed to be like as Americans if we want to be true to our founding. So, anyhow, again, Washington resigned. They didn't stand up. They didn't take their hats off. They just simply accepted his resignation. This was very symbolic. Then he became the first president, but again, didn't have to, but after 2 terms, he says, I'm stepping down. That's symbolic of the way power should be. That is absolutely symbolic of the way we honor Washington because he honored us. If he didn't honor us, we wouldn't even honor him. So if you're military, if you're leadership, if you're law enforcement, whatever it is, we honor you because you honor us. And if you ever cease to honor us, well, guess what? We cease to honor you. That's all there is to it. It has to be that way. It has to be that way. That is God's plan. Nothing else short of it is. This isn't to be mean. This is literally God's plan. It's what we're commanded to be like. It is their right, it is our duty to throw off such government elsewise. And the duty is the key word right there. When government starts screwing up and throwing things out of order, right? It's not just a right for us to throw them off. It's our duty, and if we don't, we are guilty for allowing the problem to continue to go unchecked, because future generations will deal with it even worse and worse and worse. So step up to the plate early on. Don't procrastinate the day of your repentance, your political sins or your otherwise sins, as many of our leaders have told us. And anyhow, that's my thoughts. Man, I'm grateful for Washington. I love that Newt Gingrich documentary. It's awesome. Go check it out, you guys. Thanks for listening. See ya.